Hello and welcome to the Coaching Soccer Weekly podcast, bringing you educational, entertaining, and inspiring soccer content to help make you a more effective coach, player, or soccer parent. Each week, your hosts Matt Carroll and Sean Fedema sit down with world-class coaches, mentors, and program builders to help your athletes see immediate results on and off the pitch. Join us every Friday on Apple Music, Amazon, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts to start getting the best out of your best 11 today. Make sure to follow World Class Coaching on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok today for more exclusive content. On today's episode, Matt and Fed are super excited to welcome Coach William Shapiro, aka Coach Shap. Coach Shap was the Union City High School head varsity soccer coach from 2006 to 2018, where he was voted Hudson County Coach of the Year in his final season. Now as an assistant at Union City, Coach Shap serves as the United Soccer Coaches co-chair of the National High School Community and is a coaching educator for Union City Soccer Club, United Soccer Coaches, and the United States Soccer Federation. A holder of his USSF National B license as well as his UEFA C license for coaching, Coach Shap is a presenter, educator, and advocate for the growth of the game in America at the club and high school level. This podcast is brought to you by World Class Coaching and Pennant Education. Now, here are your hosts, Coach Carroll and Coach Fed. All right, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Coaching Soccer Weekly, brought to you by World Class Coaching and Pennant Education. This is Coach Fed here with Coach Matt, and also today our special guest from Union City Football Club and United Soccer Coaches. We have Coach Shap. Coach Shap, how's it going tonight?
Good. How are you guys?
Doing
Cold.
great.
Cold.
Yeah, cold.
Anyone
that
knows we're on the East Coast and it's snow. It's pretty serious.
Yeah, I just took my garbage out and it was like -5, like instant regret. Basically, so you guys have some background about how we ran into Coach Shap. So Matt and I were at the United Soccer Coaches Convention in Philadelphia. We went down there for the Saturday. We had the day pass, and we saw, and something we've talked about on this podcast a couple times, we had Paul Carazola on from Norfolk Academy. I'm talking about preseason planning. One of our earlier episodes with my head coach, Mike Parsha-Lunas, we were talking about our preseason planning, but Matt and I saw periodization and planning out your season. We were instantly drawn to the topic because that's always been such a topic for us, trying to figure out with our programs. And, Matt and I sat in the back and we were like, holy crap, this is the best thing we've heard. We've got to get this guy on the podcast and learn more. So,
Yep.
Shap, why don't you give us a little bit of a background about yourself, what you do at Union City, United Soccer Coaches, and, tell us a little bit about your journey so far.
Yeah, no, happy to. First, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. I love talking soccer, especially with a couple more Jersey guys, so it's always a good thing. So I've been coaching for 24 years. I started with the Union Hill High School girls back when Union City used to have 2 high schools before they merged to Union City High School. I've coached high school, college, recreation, travel, semi-professionally. So players as young as 3 years old and as old as like 28 years old, depending on the context. I came into playing soccer relatively late. I grew up in Vernon, New Jersey. So up in Vernon, Sussex County, massive sport up there is wrestling. So that was really my first sport. And it was my dad who, when I was about to go into high school, so I didn't play soccer until I was like 14 years old. My dad was like, hey, you need, or you should play like a fall sport to get ready for the winter, get in shape. A bunch of my friends played soccer and just jumped into it and immediately fell in love with the sport, and then just haven't stopped since. Played in college. And then when I was in my like junior, senior of college, I knew that I wasn't going to play professionally. I was a decent player, but I just knew I wasn't going to play professionally. Coaching, and since I'm a public school teacher, sort of made the most logical sense. And started in 2002, 2003, and haven't stopped since. So, it's basically my journey so far.
No, so that's so Shap, that's all great. You bring a wide, range of experience to everything that you do with not only your high school athletes, but with your coach's education too. I recently saw, I think on your Instagram, you're going to be doing a D license coming up soon.
Yeah, so I'm an instructor for U.S. Soccer. I'm an instructor for United Soccer Coaches. I'm currently teaching a D license that's being hosted down in Pottersville, New Jersey. I just finished a D license that was in Brooklyn, New York. I'm constantly teaching courses, whether it's for United Soccer coaches or US Soccer. I probably teach maybe 10 or 12 courses a year, give or take, every year for like the last 5 or 6 years.
Now, what was your role in what you were teaching and coaching at the coaches convention? Were you just doing the periodization? Were you doing like the high school diploma? Like, what was some of the things that you were doing there and presenting on?
So I'm the national co-chair for the high school community. So I work with coaches from all over the country. That's my role for United Soccer coaches within the high school community. I had 5 presentations at the convention. Actually, periodization was one of them. I have some connections with some of the instructors from the Scottish FA. I've been going over to Scotland to start my UEFA badges the last couple of years. So I was working on a project and they asked me to present part of what I was working on there, which was kind of cool because Roberto Martinez walked in the room while I was presenting. And that was kind of like a nice little bucket list moment for me. Like
I did see that. He was there. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was kind of cool. And I was obviously helping because of my role on the national committee, like helping with the All-American Awards, with the Coach of the Year Awards, just different things, taking meetings. So the convention was great. I love the convention. It's one of my favorite things to do, to be involved with in terms of coaching education. But it was also exhausting. Pretty much I was there for 6 days and I was doing anywhere between 27,000 and 33,000 steps a day, give or take, depending on, the day, just the amount of different meetings and stuff I had to take part.
I can only imagine because the one year that I did the 4 days, the last time it was in Philly, by the time I got to Saturday, I was like, I didn't know my left from right, just from like pure exhaustion of like the learning. So I can't imagine with all you're doing, like getting the presentations ready. Obviously, I'm sure you're networking, talking with so many different people like Matt and I asking you, hey, can you answer my question? Can you send me this presentation? You want to be on my podcast? So
I don't think you had the same reaction from our message that you had with Roberto Martinez, but I get it.
It was close. It was close. No, it was close. I'll tell you.
You did respond pretty quickly. I was like, all right.
No, honestly, I love the convention. So I wasn't exaggerating when I talk about how much I enjoy it. Like, number one, first of all, it's just the education part. Like, so apart from my presentations, like I love just being able to go and sit and watch classroom presentations, field sessions, just like learning as much as I possibly can. But then, you hit the nail on the head, like networking. I mean, I have friends from being involved in the game and in coaching education and with US Soccer and United Soccer coaches. I have friends kind of from all over the country and all over the world that are involved in the sport at tons of different levels. And the convention is like the one time a year I get to see friends like from Canada, California, Florida, Texas, that I don't get to see. And so, it's a great exhaustion. Like it is, it's draining. Like it was nice, led up right up to, we were off from school on Martin Luther King Day. So like, it was like, I had a nice time to sort of, when I got home, just relax and decompress. For me, and I try to push whenever it's in Philly. I try to get as many coaches to go, New Jersey coaches anyway, because it is such a huge opportunity to learn and network and just have a new experience. And I know it's tough. I obviously, you can do the day pass or whatever, but with Philly being so close, next year is in Kansas City. There are years where it's out in California. So I get the logistic hurdle that it can sometimes represent. But for any of the listeners that are listening, if you've never gone, you really need to make it a priority to get out there at some point in your life, because the convention is an incredible experience.
It really is. Like, and even just like I was talking to you before we got on, it's like, I hear some amazing things, but just that concept, like you said, of being around other coaches, I feel like you get stuck in this rut, you get stuck in what you do and how you do it, and then you're like, you're just kind of feeding off that, and it's kind of like you're almost like cannibalizing yourself to sort of go and hear all these different voices give you their different takes. And I told you, I went from Marcus DiBernardo. I saw his presentation about, being loose and flexible, and then I went to yours about periodization. It was like two different concepts, and it was kind of swirling around my head. It was amazing. But before we get into some more of that periodization stuff and some, you're looking at your headline of your one of your presentations, periodization in the high school game. We try to kind of cater to variety, that you're the coach that's just starting off, or you're you're a college coach. But for someone that's like just kind of getting into it, you're coaching your kid's rec team. You're maybe, like we talked about before the show, you're the coach that you're working at a school. You've coached softball, like Coach O on our last episode, and now you're trying to get into coach education. What are some of the things, where is the grassroots level stuff you would suggest getting into?
In terms of coaching education, I mean, I'm of the opinion that you should learn from as many different points of view as possible. Again, I work for US Soccer, I work for United Soccer Coaches. There's a couple other coaching education platforms I might start working for in the near future, and I like that. It sometimes a little confusing for me because sometimes there's little differences between the methodologies and the philosophies between US Soccer and United Soccer, and but for me, I think that makes me a better educator and a better learner because I just routinely look at things from multiple points of view. So if you're talking about a recreation coach or a grassroots coach, I mean, that's sort of the beauty of living in 2026. Like, there is so many virtual courses, online courses. There's so many opportunities. I wouldn't worry about necessarily where you're starting. Like US Soccer, like, yeah, you could start the grassroots pathway and just, it's very linear. That's one of the strengths of US Soccer. Like, you have to do grassroots, then D license, then C license. So it's pretty easy roadmap to follow. Whereas United Soccer Coaches, it's a bit more, you can kind of tailor it. Like, you can only take the goalkeeping courses if you want to only take the goalkeeping courses. Like, let's say if you're just starting out and you're going to help out a coach, maybe you're a volunteer parent and you're going to help out just the goalkeepers, but you don't really have a huge goalkeeping background. If you tried the US Soccer pathway, you'd have to first take your grassroots, then take your D license, then wait 6 months to take your C license. Then after you finish your C license, then you could take the first goalkeeper specific course for US Soccer. For United Soccer Coaches, you could just take the goalkeeping courses. So you can kind of skip those prerequisites. So what I would say is it really depends on your context, but the main thing would be to just jump into the learning aspect and just never stop, because it doesn't matter who you are or how many years or what level you've coached. Everybody can continue to learn. That's something I just feel very strongly about. And so, for anyone who's listening, and if they're just starting out, like, go to ussoccer.com and sign up for a grassroots course. Go to United Soccer Coaches and sign up for a course. Like, anyone can just do that. And there's so many different opportunities available to you. You just have to start, right? Just one step forward. That's it.
Just get in there. Yeah. Yeah. And I feel like that's kind of where I was at, again, like you said, where we're at now with coaching education, the availability and all that stuff. I remember, taking my courses and stuff like that, and I was just desperate for more information. Now, listening to you talk and hearing some of the things you're doing, you're going to the Scottish. It's so funny. I don't know. I have old tabs saved, and I've opened up. I had like a bunch of the old Scottish FA stuff that was up there that they'd posted that I used to go into. But for someone like you, you've got this level of and depth of education where you're doing 5 presentations. You're talking to the Scottish FA. What are some of the things that you're going above and beyond to get that information? What are you learning? I mean, how much more can you learn at this point? You've got all this information. Like, tell us what some of the tidbits you're getting here.
I mean, when you talk about, you have all this, and yeah, I do have a huge background, and again, almost quarter of a century, been coaching or involved in it, but still, like, I maintain that there never will be a point, like, and I've said this to people who've asked me, like, when will I stop coaching or give it up? But like, if I ever feel like I don't want to learn anything more, like, that's when, for me, I'll pull the plug, because I don't care. It doesn't matter what sport you're in. Like, you can always, or in any job, really, you can always get better, right? Like, you could be a world-class chef, but you can get better. You could be a IndyCar driver, you can get better. You could be a doctor, you can get better. It doesn't matter, right? So for me, no matter where you go or what you do, like, you continue to get better. So no matter, who you are, what stage of your coaching journey you are, and the D license you brought up before, like, we had class last night and there's a coach on it who's been coaching 25 years, and this D license is only the third course he's ever taken, right? He took his 2 grassroots course and now he's taking this D license. He's got 25 years experience coaching and do it. So there's no time limit. There's no, I'm too old or I'm too young. For US Soccer or for United Soccer Coaches, you can, if you're 16 years old, that's the minimum age requirement to take a course. You can be 16 and start taking courses, or you can be 66 and start taking courses, right? So for me, like, that's something that I think that's what drives me a great deal. Like, I want to learn, like, no matter what. Like, so yeah, so going to Scotland, doing UEFA stuff, and like, when I'm done there, then I'll go somewhere else. Like, I just going to continue to do it because I think it makes me not just a better coach, but I'm also a public school teacher. Like, I maintain that a lot of the stuff I learn in these different coaching education courses like can translate to my classroom teaching as well, because I think of teaching and coaching as the same if it's done well, right? Like I see there's a lot of crossover. Like, it's just, when you're on the field and you're with players, that's your classroom. So it's just a different content area, right? Like, so you have English, you have history, you have math, and then you have soccer or football or hockey or lacrosse or swimming. Like, I just think that that's how I view it. And so it makes me a better educator, a better communicator. So, I just want to keep doing it as much as I possibly can.
That reminds me of a book that I read a while back now, probably 2 or 3 years ago, Teach Like a Champion. I'm a Notre Dame fan, but like even then I was like, but the book, I was like, all right, I'll give it a shot. And it's about bringing your coaching experience and your teaching experience and using those two things interchangeably. And I think that's absolutely true. Like you learn how to manage, such a diverse group of students in your classroom, and then you go out to the pitch, and everyone wants to play soccer, but they're coming from so many different backgrounds and meeting them where they're at, and there's so many lessons to be kind of dragged between the two. And I think, again, being a better coach is going to make you a better teacher, and being a better teacher is going to make you a better coach for sure. What are you say some of the differences you're finding? I mean, you're going to the UEFA license, you got all your licenses here. What are some of the big differences in the way they're teaching the game through the UEFA license than say the United Soccer Coaches Federation?
I mean, here in the
Soccer Federation.
Here in the States, it's a newer approach, right? And I say newer because, and then knowing people from around the world, they'll sometimes give me a little bit of stick or a little bit of hard time. Oh, the US, we're not very good, or this, that, and the other thing. But at the same time, it's like, and I'm 44 years old, I was at the first MLS game at what used to be Giant Stadium when it was the Metro Stars versus the New England Revolution. Like I was
Still
there
Giant
physically. Stadium. Well, okay, yeah. But I was there at that game. Yeah. There's not a lot of people in England or Scotland or Spain that can say that they were there for the first. Obviously, the leagues have changed and the names have changed, but like the first professional soccer.
There for Notts County.
No, it was not. No, yeah, wasn't there for like the FA Cup first ever game. You know what I mean? And it's like, so for us, I think we're still finding our way and we're still sort of evolving. I think that's one advantage to like what the US has over the UEFA stuff. The UEFA stuff is absolutely brilliant. Like it's much more of a focus on like tactical components. Like that's a massive difference. Like I would say like between the USC courses, US soccer courses and what I've done when I was over in Scotland, like it's so much more of a tactical emphasis. And you see that too with the players. Like when we go over there and we're working the different assignments and we're using players or other coaches, and kids as young as 14, 15, 16, you're having a tactical conversation with them and you're like, wow, you're so much smarter. Like, again, like, whereas here it's more, I would say it's more like a physical or technical focus here in the States as opposed to the tactical stuff. Not that it's not an important component, but over there, that's what we were like basically drilled into, like just much more the tactical side.
Yeah, that's what it felt like when I took the courses. It was like all the people were like, "Well, when are we gonna learn the tactical part?" I'm like, "Well, we're gonna teach you how to coach first, and then you can start doing all that stuff." But that was like a big thing that people were like confused that we weren't hammering home in some of these licenses.
Yeah, and I get that too, but also too, like I said, like other like the Scottish FA, the English FA, like all these other organizations, first of all, number one, they have complete uniformity across the country, right? In Scotland, everyone kind of approaches the game the same way. Spain, Germany, England, like Denmark, Wales, like there's whereas here in the States, and I think there's pros and cons to that. Like I'm very much a believer in multiple points of view. So I agree. Like, and again, like the negative of that is that's why like sometimes we can't agree on certain things or, like a methodology or philosophy in this country is a little bit different. Whereas if you see Germany play, they play like a German side, right? Like, or England or France or something. Like you can kind of, if you were colorblind and you couldn't see the colors of the jerseys, you could identify a team by their playing style. With us, it's not.
I am colorblind, so I can't attest to that statement. Yes.
There you go. See, thank you, Coach. Appreciate you backing me up. But yeah, I think, there's that. But at the same time, like, the fact that we're still evolving, and that's kind of why, or one of the things I love about being involved in coaching and coaching education in this country is that we are still evolving and learning, right? Like the D license I'm teaching now, the one that's being hosted in Pottersville, and the one I just finished like 2 weeks ago in Brooklyn, New York. As of January 1st this year, the D license curriculum changed. Like it's a new curriculum. So what it was for the students that were in my Brooklyn course that started before January 1st. It was the old curriculum, and then the one there. Like, there's not that much change or evolution in other countries. Not that there isn't, but like, we're still figuring it out, and we're going to make mistakes, and we're going to learn from those mistakes. Like at the convention, apart from the regular stuff, we also had like coaching education meetings for United Soccer coaches. And then we also had coaching education meetings for US Soccer. I was not standing still for more than 8 seconds the whole convention, but like, and a big part of both of those meetings for both of those organizations was really a focus on like, how can we get better? How can we improve this? There's a mindset of continuing to improve, right? And that's something I'm very much a fan of. The idea that, like, one of my favorite coaching quotes or education quotes is, I may not be there yet, but I'm closer than I was yesterday. And like, depending on your coaching context or where you are in your life or job or whatever it is, like, it's easy sometimes to feel overwhelmed, but as long as you can make like small incremental bits of progress, like eventually you string enough of those together, you're going to get better at whatever you're doing. And so for me, like, that's a major difference here is we're still learning and figuring it out. Other countries have a bit more background, and again, it's a little easy. I wouldn't say it's easier, but in other countries or outside of the States, like, because soccer is like the official sport for most other countries, there's more of that sort of like natural tendency to approach it that way, as opposed to here. It's a little bit different for us since we have so many different sports and so many different things going on.
And I love that approach too of this whole, continually learning, be a continual learner of the game. Because your players are gonna see that and be like, hey, look, coach is literally going over to Europe and trying to learn stuff and try to bring it back to us. So I'm sure that you bring the stuff back and your players are instantly bought in. Not just because like, oh, this is from the Scottish or the English FA, so it's obviously going to work on the field, but just that idea of, hey, like, Shap is putting in so much time trying to give back to us that
they were shocked when we read books. Forth.
Right.
Like, you read a book. Like, yeah, about soccer. Yeah, about my job.
Yeah. Best part of coaching winter track was I read the inverting the pyramid when my athletes weren't going the entire time. Just sat there took notes the entire time. But I had kids on the soccer team who saw me reading it and were like, okay, like, this coach is, again, like, my playing experience is 0 to none, but saw me at least like putting in the effort to like learn things. I went to the convention 4 days last time. We only did a day pass this time when it was in Philly, but people got to understand is your players see that. Your players see if your team's not improving, if you're going down in results, and it's just like, hey, well, we're just going to keep doing the same thing again and again and again, right? That buy-in's not going to be there. So I think that I'm glad you hit that, because that's just so important for the players to see, not just, hey, this is going to help us and our team get better. It's, this coach obviously cares. It's an adult in my life. It's the same thing in the classroom. If the kids see who goes the extra mile in the classroom, and good teaching is good coaching, right?
Exactly. And it's great that when your players do see it, because they see it's sort of reciprocal, like they're putting in work perhaps in the off season or they're working hard. But even if they don't, like, I feel like it's the responsibility of any educator, whether it's a coach or a classroom teacher, is to continue to get better. Because I don't care what kid or what background or what city or what town or what context they're in. Kids can sniff out really quickly when somebody's just phoning it in. Like, when they're just like, this is just busy work. They're just giving us a worksheet, or this is just a activity or drill that coach is just doing to keep us busy. Like, they see that. But if they see, oh, wow, coach look how much work they put in, right? And again, like, even if they don't, like, I still think it's a responsibility I have as just a coach to constantly challenge myself to get better, because I know that with my players or the other coaches I work with, so like at the high school level or in the club level, because I'm the DOC, like, again, like, I would never ask someone to do something that I'm not willing to do. And so I ask everyone I work with, to like work hard and sacrifice and learn and get better. So I have to do the same thing, right? Like, I'm a big lead by example person. Like, if I'm sitting around and not trying to get better, and yet I'm yelling at kids or yelling at other adults or people I work with, like, oh, you need to work harder, but I'm not, like, I can't wrap my head around that kind of thinking.
Yeah, and before we get into a little more about like the actual periodization part, because I'm itching to get into that. We did talk about something before about the high school coaches. In New Jersey, I'm not sure what it is like in different states, but in New Jersey, there's really not a requirement. You got 60 college credits, I believe. I think they might even like knock that down because of there's like a teacher shortage going on right now, and there's loosened relatives, but it was generally 60 credits to be a coach. And there isn't there's no requirements. You don't need a license to be a high school coach. So we talked a little bit about that and what that entails, and for me and Sean and most of the coaches I know, that's not really an issue, because if you're getting into it, for the most part, you're going in and you're trying to get those licenses, you're trying to get education, stuff like that. But you are in all these different organizations. You talk about UEFA, you talk about USC. If you're developing, let's say there's a license we want to create, it's for people that are getting into the high school game, but they don't have the soccer background. What are the key things you're hitting home on that course? You have full go. You can design however you want, Shap. What does that look like to you?
I mean, definitely, I think it's important that coaches get some element of, and we'll get into it with the periodization, but just like how to plan out a training session, because I think that's half the battle. High school across the country, regardless of what state, pretty much one commonality is just the brutal war of attrition that is high school seasons, right? So once the games start, 2, 3, 4 games a week, every week for 8, 10, 12 weeks, whatever it is. So being able to efficiently plan out what you're going to do in training, I think, is so important. So that would be one element. Also, I think that coaches should have some element of like the psychology of coaching, because I think that it's so incredibly important to understand that. And again, none of us, I mean, very few coaches that I've ever met are trained psychologists or counselors or social workers, but we are de facto those people for our kids, right? Like there's so many.
I married one. I married a social worker, so that helped me out. But that's why I needed that. Like I was like, I don't know. He's crying. What do I do?
Yeah, exactly. And then there's got to be some element of, it doesn't necessarily, and I know most high school coaches are also involved with like education. Most of them are public school teachers or private school teachers. But if not, like there should be some course on like just communicating information, because for me, that's so crucial. Like I've seen really good coaches or people who really understood the game very, very well, but they cannot communicate it to their players. And so then it doesn't matter what you know, right? Like, and on the flip side, I've seen people that don't necessarily have the greatest understanding of the game, but they're so good at communicating information that they can be life-changing. Like people ask me all the time, like because of all of the different stuff I do with coaching education, like who are my sort of like Mount Rushmore of coaches that I've had. And for me, it was my high school wrestling coach and my high school theater teacher. And the second one, people typically give me a look like, what? But William R. Donald, may he rest in peace. He passed a couple of years ago, but he was one of the best communicators of information while also maintaining insanely high standards. And like he could hold you accountable for something, like, and he would not give an inch for anything, like an after school play or the littlest performance, but at the same time treated you like a person and was incredibly fair and was able to communicate information. And I think that's a valuable skill with coaching. So for high school coaches, especially if they're just starting out, being able to plan out a session, because there's 1,000 different ways to do that, right? So, helping coaches to understand how to do that. Some element of like psychology of coaching, like what's the best way to deal with those issues. And then whether it's however you want to phrase it, communication or the dissemination of ideas, but the ability to get what's in my head logically explained to my players is so important, because very often when I see coaches get frustrated, it's because what they see in their head and what the kids are doing, there's a disconnect. And so if you can solve that through communication, I think that's half the battle right there.
Yeah, isn't it like if you can't explain it in 10 seconds, you don't understand it yourself? Something like that?
Yeah, that was Einstein. Yeah, Einstein said if you can't explain the topic simply, then you don't understand it. Yeah, that's it. Which is,
and I know we're about
to quote Einstein.
And I know we're about to get into it with the periodization piece, but I love that communication part. And just so many times I've seen coaches just jump in and be like, okay, I know the game, but even just being a head coach, it's the last thing, like 10% of it is your strategies. And, there's just so much more the fundraising aspect, not only communication with your players, communication with your parents, and being socially emotional aware of yourself, that I think sometimes people just jump into the profession and just like, okay, let's go. I know how to kick a ball. Let's get into it.
And coach how they've been coached as well.
Right.
That's a huge part. Yeah.
Like, I feel like with all this education, I think the hardest part for me was like, all right, this person said this thing, so I should do it now. And then like I do it, and the kids are like, what the hell are you doing? Like, this isn't you. Or I try to be my old coach, and like they're like, yeah, who are you? Like, but it's about taking these things and putting them and putting them into play. And like I said, like I had Coach DiBonardo, and then I had you back to back in those sessions. It's like, I'm not going to do those things the way you did them, but I'm going to take pieces and make them the way I do things, and drawing those things out and making them authentic, I think, is really important as well. Not just being like, here's how you do it, this is how everyone does it, go do it. And I think that's, with this coaching education stuff, it's some people I feel like take it that way, and it really should be more of like, hey, here's some really great tips from some people that have been successful. Find a way to push this into your style of coaching.
Yeah, no, and I had a mentor who said that the best coaches are creative thieves. And what he kind of meant by that was like, I can watch you teach, okay, we're going to work on defending in the middle third today, and you run a session on how you and your players defend in the middle third. And just like you were saying, Coach, like I might not agree with everything you said, but there might be one or two with, ooh, that's good. And if I can pull those pieces out into my own context and say, okay, I can creatively steal your ideas and kind of put them together with my own, I think that's the art of coaching, right? Is because how you do something and how I do something are very different. And I totally take your point of how we were coached and also how coaching has changed. I think that too often, especially with some of the coaches that I see, they equate coaching with just, well, I have to be yelling and screaming and losing my mind all the time. And again, like that's very often counterintuitive, right? Like very often that's how you lose players. Yeah, there are some players that respond to sort of like a drill instructor type of like coach. Yeah, fair, but not everybody. And I feel like if you can't communicate, yelling is not communicating. I tell my players that all the time. Like one of my funny things when, especially not just young players, even high school players, we stress, in sports, you got to communicate. And sometimes you'll have kids that they'll take that into meaning, I'm just going to say your name repeatedly, like Matt, like 12 times.
Yes. He knows his name, dude. He knows your name. Like,
yeah, no, like that's
not the only information you're presenting.
That's not communicate. Like Matt, turn in the corner, split 1-2, give and go, something, like. But again, it's. I think that too often, coaches and players, they just think, well, if I'm making noise, I'm communicating, and very often not. And especially in my role as being a coaching education instructor, a lot of times when I'm observing coaches, grading them on an assignment or something, they get very uncomfortable when they're not talking, because here I am, I'm grading, I'm watching them, I'm observing them, I'm like sort of evaluating how they're doing. And I have to, and I remind them constantly, my student coaches on the course, I'll say, listen, it's okay to take a beat. Like you can relax, collect yourself. Obviously I don't want you to be mute the entire practice, but silence can also be incredibly powerful and also can allow you to sort of collect your thoughts instead of just yelling and screaming. Because I find it hilarious when I see coaches from the first whistle to the last whistle screaming their head off. And I'm often wondering, what the hell are you working on in training? Like if you have to talk, if you have to yell, if you have to scream every 1 second, that tells me that you're not really planning, you're not really working on anything realistic in your training. Because if you did, then the players would be able to sort of demonstrate what you've been working on. So for me, that's a disconnect.
Yeah, like I've seen it where like some coaches literally are like playing FIFA, like pass right, shoot now, do this. And the first thought is, me and our staff, like we look at each other up and down the bench, we're like, what is going on in practice that you're literally joysticking these kids to death from kickoff to the 80th minute? And again, with the communication piece, Shap, I think that something that you did really well and something that I was impressed about with your presentation as we start to pivot into the periodization was even just the communication with your coaches. Because obviously, if you're going to make this whole plan work, right, you're going to plan out your season and you're saying, hey, coach, I want you to run a session on winning the ball in the middle third. this is how I want it done. You have to communicate your vision so well to your coaches to be able to do that. So if again, so just assuming you're a first time coach, never really, listen or heard of the idea of periodization before, how would you describe periodization to somebody who has little experience with it? And especially, for three of us being Jersey guys playing 3 games a week, well, sometimes 4, why is that so important?
So periodization, for anyone who's unfamiliar, it's a fancy way of describing having a long-term plan. Like that's it. Like it's just having an understanding of, okay, we have to plan out. And you have elements of that. Every coach, even if they've never sat down and consciously thought about it, they've already kind of had a periodization plan, because the moment you get your game schedule for the season and you know what days you're practicing, like you have a sense of what your training set or your plans are going to be. The difference between that and like an actual periodization plan is that a periodization plan involves you scripting out, what do I want to work on during the course of the season? What are my KPIs? What are my goals? What are my objectives throughout the course of the season? And for every coach, a periodization plan is incredibly specific, or it should be, to their own context. Because my kids, my program, my season, my environment is going to be very different than every other coach's. So it's not a one size fit all. It's not a cookie cutter. There's elements that your periodization plan should have, but it should be very unique to you. And I think it's the job of any head coach or a leader of a program to have an understanding of, okay, like, here's where we're starting. Before the preseason even begins, whatever that looks like, if you're in New Jersey, if you're in California, wherever, like before my preseason, do I have a sense of what the season's going to look like and what I want to hit? And where are the tent poles? Where are the things that I want to work on throughout the course of the season relative to my games? And most of the time when people talk periodization, it's a lot more, I shouldn't say easier, but it's a lot more flexible in a club setting, because you're training 2-3 nights a week and you have one game on the weekends and everything's lovely and rosy, and it's a lot more, you have a lot more time. Whereas with high school, it's just brutal, right? Like, because as you said,
I think that's why I took the course, or the session you put on there, because once it gets into it, you're like, it's an onslaught, and you're like, I had a plan.
You're done. Like, yeah.
I'm cooked. Like, there's this game, that game. There's 10 different games of, watching the film. You had 3 games this week. You're watching all that film. Breaking it down is like just so difficult. Like, and I think one of the things you brought up that I really, really enjoyed was having that plan versus reacting. And I want to talk a little bit about that, of like, how much are you reacting? How much are you sticking to that plan? Because like you said in the session, you talked about, normally what you're doing is you had a game, it went poorly. Okay, what went poorly? Let's try to fix that next practice. We have a game on Wednesday. We did that. We had that game on Monday. Tuesday, you're trying to fix a problem, but you really can't even practice it, and things like that. So you talked a lot about not just like fixing the immediate problem, putting out fires all the time, but having that plan. And I think that really struck me, the importance of periodization.
Yeah, I would argue that periodization is more important in a high school setting than the club, because you have such limited time. Like, again, for anyone who works in the club side or is familiar with it, you have more time because you train more than you play, right? Like, so in New Jersey, my teams that play for my club, they play 10 games in the entire season. So for the fall season, my U14s played 10 games. That's it. Like, that could be 2.5 weeks in a high school season playing 10 games, which is insanity, which is absolute insanity. So for me, it's so important to have a plan because you have such limited time. It for me, and I know I'm sort of dating myself here, but it's very much like nails on a chalkboard. When I see high school coaches deciding what they're going to do in training when they arrive to training, that blows my mind. Right? Like, and again, I understand, like, we all have other full-time jobs. None of us do this full-time. I completely understand that. But there's nothing that says that you have to wait until you get to the field to start planning stuff out, because then you're not just being reactive, but you're sort of just improvising, and you haven't put a whole lot of thought into what it is you're going to work on, right? Like, if you're arriving already with a plan, it's a little bit easier to change the plan, because that's the other thing I hear very often from coaches, like, oh, why are you going to do that? And then this kid's sick, or you got to change the plan. So you change the plan, but at least I have something. And I firmly believe that it's easier to adapt an already decided plan than it is to just make up something, shooting from the hip, calling an audible, doing what yeah, there are times where you have to do that. You arrive and you have to throw the practice plan out the window because something happened and you gotta make some changes. But if that's your constancy, if you're constantly having to just make it up, that to me is folly. You're missing things, right? Like the amount of coaches that I see that when they, do that sort of scattergun approach, then they either miss things, or it's also kind of more overwhelming for the players because they're juggling so many things, and now there doesn't seem to be any sort of like planning behind what they're working on in training, that it's so scatterbrained or so sort of improvised that the players are going to figure that out too. They're going to see, well, we're just kind of going through the motions here, or it's not really that, clear cut for the coach. And again, I think that ultimately it's the responsibility of the head coach or the leader of the program. Like, they should have a plan for what they're going to do, right? And if they don't understand it clearly, it's unfair to expect your assistant coaches or the other stakeholders you work with to understand it, and especially the players. If you don't understand what it is you're working on, and it requires time, it requires effort, it requires, thinking. But again, for me, that's the job of a coach. I would love, I'm older now, but there have been plenty of times where I wish I could have put the boots back on and gotten on the field and actually played to help my team out. But that's never going to be the case for me as a coach. I am never going to play in order to help my team. My responsibility, or the best way I can help out any team I work with, is to think about and to plan how I help my players get where they need to go. And periodization is a systematic and organized approach to doing that, so that you can efficiently use the incredibly limited time you have, especially in a high school season, right? Like, if you're playing Monday, Wednesday, Friday, you get Tuesday, Thursday, you can't really do that much. Maybe you're beat up, you're banged up, you played a really tough game Monday night, and so now you're coming in Tuesday. But you need to have a plan, and that's got to be established before. But it can't be 5 minutes before you're walking on the field Tuesday when you're deciding what it is you want to do.
So what I'm hearing from you is like the preparation leads to the ability to improvise. Like if you have that idea, like at the end of the session, I want the players to do X, Y, and Z, and then this kid's sick and he's not here. Or, we have issues. The girls are using half the field, and I now have to go from half the field. You can adjust from that easier if you have that end game in mind, rather than being like, I had like. We got this. Let me try to throw something together. That ability to improvise isn't what's the word I'm looking for? Like, isn't affected negatively by the preparation. Like, you're not stuck to this plan.
Exactly. No, and when people see the amount of work I put into, because I didn't start periodization, or I didn't really look at that sort of way of approaching coaching when I first started coaching. But then the more I started working on myself as a coach and just taking courses and started learning what I did, I was like, well, actually I'd rather have a plan and then make changes and tweaks here and there. Okay, we got to do the girls have half the field. This kid's sick, or this kid got suspended, or he can't be here. But I already had, I think that also brings a sense of not calmness, but like there's less of, oh my God, the building's on fire, because you have a plan that you've communicated to whatever other coaches you're working with, or if you're by yourself too, and the players, right? Especially if because I know some coaches might be listening to this and they don't have an assistant coach, so they're by themselves, especially if you're at the under levels or you're by yourself. Having a plan and then letting the players in on the plan helps you, okay, we're going to do this activity, this activity, this activity. That can help in the setup, in the going from activity 1 to activity 2, because the players understand what the plan is and where they're going, as opposed to, okay, we finished activity 1. Now what are we going to do? Okay, well, you go get having a plan just makes it so
Somebody
much
get some
more,
cones.
yeah, and then it's like, well, for what, and what do we need? And yeah, no, it's you waste less time with a plan, even if you have to make changes, as opposed to finishing activity one and then standing around deciding what you're going to work on. Because in high school soccer, you don't have the luxury of time. You have such limited time to get stuff done, and you got to make every single minute count when you're training.
I always say it's like raising your kids. Like, it's like, the days are 10 days long, but also like 30 minutes long. Like, it's 3 months and you're going, but like it's over before you know it, and it's hard to keep up. And I love the idea, and I love when I'm able to, like, I have my session, I send out in the morning, the kids have it, you're in the session, and what do we do next? And the kid's like, yo, you didn't read the message? Like, we know what we're doing, we have the drill. But I think for a lot of people, I think when you posted some of that stuff up at the convention, and you had that like Excel doc that you had with the periods, I think a lot of people went like, what? Like, that's crazy. Like, when you look at it, you're like, that's not soccer. That's just like a spreadsheet. But I love the way you went into all that stuff, and the way you broke it down into 3 cycles. And I want you to talk a little more about that, the 3 cycles, and how you go from which cycle do you start at? Kind of give me the process of how you're working through this periodization plan you've got for the season.
So for me, because again, I know a lot about it, but I'm not the world's expert or anything. Like, for me, I start with the macro cycle, or like the big picture. Coming in before a season, typically I start months before the season even begins. Like, because as a high school coach, very often, most of the time, you have a decent idea of, unless it's your first year coaching, you have a decent idea of what players are returning for your team, and then also what's the context of the other teams that you're going to face this year look like. That team won the league last year, but they're graduating 17 kids, so they're going to be a brand new so I start with the macro cycle, which is just basically like this idea of what's the big picture, right? And I like to look at it in terms of, okay, what are 2 or 3 like realistic goals or objectives that we want to hit this year, like in terms of the macro cycle. And all that means is like, okay, if we're starting in August, by the end of August, I want to, have covered this, and this. By the end of September, I want to have covered this, and this. By the end of October, this, and this. By the end of November, this, and this. The idea that before the season begins, I have those targets that I want to try to hit for the entire season.
Just off the top of your head, could you give me like just an example of some of the macros that you've had in years past?
So if like we had, and again, going off of very often, it sort of builds off of what we did last year. Like, one of the most successful years I was ever, or successful teams I ever had the pleasure of coaching was 2018. And at the end of the season, 2017, I think we lost in like the second round of the state tournament. We lost in the county semifinal, and we lost like our last league season of the game. So all three like games we lost, and I remember thinking that we had a core group coming back. We had the right mix of players. They just need a little bit more experience. So knowing what we had coming in, I was like, okay, by the end of August, I want to make sure we have like our philosophy of play nailed down. We're going to play with a back 4. We're going to play with 2, holding mids. We're going to play with 110, like basically just the larger pieces. I believe in formations and how they can allow players to understand what's expected of them. But our game is very fluid, and I love sort of the beautiful chaos of it. So like, I'm not too rigid in terms of that, but I need my players to understand certain big picture things, how we're going to defend in our defensive third, middle third, and then in the final third. How are we going to attack in the final third, middle third, defensive third, just big picture things like that. By the end of August. By the end of September, have I been able to rotate enough players? Because I've never gone through a high school season where my starting 11 at the start of the season was the same at the end of the season. Because, high school, again, as we've mentioned several times.
You said that, and that hit home, yeah.
Yeah, because whether it's injury, grades, kids moving out of town, like whatever, like their high school soccer, because it is so physically demanding and even mentally demanding, right? Like by the end of the season, you need to have game changers, right? Like I try to get coaches to use the term game changers instead of substitutes, because, like very often I'm on the bench, or I'm a benchy, or I'm a sub, like, and there's that sort of that connotation of like, you're not as good. So I try to encourage coaches whenever I can, like, don't call them subs, call them game changers. Like, have them, and if you authentically mean it, they'll sort of buy in as well. But by the end of September, have I rotated enough of those players that people are flexible in positions? Because we all know injuries happen, sickness happen, kids have a bad run of games, whatever it is. I have to be able to rotate players by the end of September. By the end of October, are we pretty nailed down with all of that? And then also, like an easy one, like most of the time, from what I've seen, high school programs typically don't work, like, say, PKs until a week before the state tournament starts. And so you've gone 8 weeks, and now, you might get 2 or 3 training sessions where, okay, the last 10, 15 minutes, we're going to do PKs and we're going to play music, or we're going to have the band come out, or we're going to have the other players yell and scream things to try to try to replicate, big games. And then you get to a state tournament, and then it's like the shootout could decide, are you playing for a sectional final or not, or are you advancing or not? So do we have those things nailed down well before the state tournament? Like, that would be another thing I'd want to get done well before the end of October. So again, just big picture stuff for the macro cycle. The meso cycle is the week to week. So, we're going to train Tuesday, Thursday. I want to work on these elements Tuesday, these elements Thursday. And then that's on a weekly basis. And that's where I think I would say, like, again, as you get more and more specific, you can be a bit more flexible, because obviously what you want to accomplish week 3 or week 4, things might change. But again, I maintain it's better to have a plan and then change it than not have a plan. And then the microcycle is literally the day to day. Typically, I'll do that the Sunday night before the week of a training week, like, and say, okay, here are the activities we're going to work on Tuesday. Here are the activities we're going to work on Thursday. Specifically, here's why we're going to work on, well, because the opponent we have on Wednesday, they're a counterattacking team. So we're going to do these activities because that's going to best prepare us to face those guys. And again, that requires the most amount of specificity. So the smaller in cycle you get, the more specific you need to get, just based on what you're doing.
So would you say, like, the macro cycles of the season, the meso is like a 2 to 3 week, maybe cutting the season to like 8s, and then like the smallest is like your weekly plan for that.
Yeah, and as you make the circle smaller, so because I think of the macro as, again, I just think of it all as in circles, and they're all sort of, the micro is inside, then the meso, and then the macro is the circle that goes all the way around. For me, like, the smaller the circle, the more specific you need to get. Because for the macro, you can't plan out every single thing. And if you try to, you're just going to drive yourself crazy, because there's so many variables. But having those things and where you want to be by the end of August, here are the things I want to have accomplished. Because we all know too, especially if you've coached for a number of years, sometimes you blink and you're halfway through your season, right? Like, you just, and it's
feels like that all the time. Yeah.
Yeah. And if you don't have those things established before, because once the season starts, it's so hard to now try to think of those things, because you're putting out fires, right? Like, and you're reacting to things, or you're having to make changes or decisions or alterations to the plan. You can't be making the plan and making alterations to the plan at the same time. It's not going to work out well for anybody.
Now, Coach, I got a few different questions for you with that. So my first one, I'm going to ask you kind of overall. At what point in the season, so say you set these goals, like, we're going to play with a back 4, 2 holding mids. At what point in a season do you feel like it's okay? Like, if you're looking at a style of play or formation, something you've been doing, you're like, okay, this is not working, right? Like, I'm watching a Thomas Frank Tottenham on their 5th different formation with their 7th different best 11 and 20 games in, right? At what
good
point,
coaching advice? Do the exact opposite of what Tottenham's doing.
Yes, exactly.
Whatever they're doing, just don't do that.
But at what point, in a season, do you look at your plan and kind of be like, okay, this is working, or do you think, hey, maybe we need to adjust? Because Matt and I, when we were coaching together in New Egypt, we usually found, what would you say, Matt, usually halfway through the season, or sometimes even, the year that we went to the sectional final, we made a style play and a formation change, like, with maybe 5 regular season games to go, and it carried us to a sectional final. So, like, at what point in your periodization plan do you look at making those changes, if you're going to make them? And then at what point is it like, okay, die is cast. We're running with this the rest of the way.
I mean, first, what I would say is a lot of it deals with like your context. So like, for instance, if you have a very young team, let's say you're starting a bunch of sophomores and juniors, I'm of the opinion that you should give them more time, because I'm very much a believer in like long-term player development as opposed to short-term. But again, if you have now the opposite, where you have, no, this is a very senior laden team, and so number one, I would say the context matters. But for me, part of the periodization plan as well, and it's something I covered in the presentation, there's also like actionable pieces of data you can look at and say, are we hitting those targets, right? Like, and so if we recognize, oh wow, we had 3 games this week, we gave up 22 shots, our goalkeeper stood on his head, he made a bunch of great saves, but we gave up 22 shots, whereas the week prior we only gave up 11 shots. We doubled the amount of shots we gave up. That allows me to then recognize that there's a change that I need to make, but tied to some sort of data. Very often I think that, and again, I think data gets a bad rap. Like I teach English. I hate math. I don't like numbers and math. It's just not how my brain works, right? A lot of people are surprised to hear that, because I'm typically a very logical person, so they're surprised. But
I would not have guessed that based on the KPIs you put up there. It was like,
I'm like, this guy's in
that's a
AP
lot
stat.
of math.
No, absolutely not. Like English, theater, public speaking, Shakespeare, absolutely. Math is like my kryptonite. Don't like it. But the reason, so I look at those more sort of like when you're talking about your data points, it allows me to make much more objective decisions about where I'm doing well and where I need work, right? So when I talk to coaches and I ask like, oh, okay, how'd you do? And they're like, oh, well, we played badly. Well, what does that mean? Like, I felt like we played badly, or, oh, we played terribly, or we played great. Well, what does that look like? Like, whereas if you can say, well, week 1, we gave up 11 shots. Week 2, we gave up 22 shots. That's a huge difference in terms of the numbers. And so the data could perhaps lead me to believe like, okay, well, do we need to change our formation because what we played, maybe we're playing with a back 3 and wing backs, but nope, we're giving up too many shots. We've been lucky so far, or maybe we haven't, maybe you've lost, and we need to now address it. So I'm okay with, again, as long as there is again, sort of like having an informed decision. I don't think it's fair to do to players or coaches or anyone involved in the program to always be reactionary. Like, because you can have a bad game, right? Like you can have one game, just it wasn't your day, and that happens. We're not working, like you brought up Spurs, which is funny. Those are professional athletes. Those are people that like that's their entire living and everything. We're working with kids that spend 8-9 hours in a school day, and now they're showing up, and maybe they didn't have the perfect game. Fine. But if you can recognize a pattern or a trend and you see, okay, wow, or you recognize, oh, last week every goal we gave up was from a cross. Like the other team is recognizing, or we're weak at defending crosses, and that's how the other team is scoring. We have to maybe now we have to go to wing backs. I need to put more pressure out in the wings so that we're not allowing crosses in because we're not in. So my answer to you, coach, is if you can make an informed change, I don't think there's necessarily a right or wrong time to make that change, as long as it's informed, right? Like, but if you're just like, oh, we're like, it drives me nuts when I hear coaches say things like, oh, we need to be better, or that's not great. Like, well, but what is? Like, if you can't be objective about it, because we see, and again, even as coaches, our perspective of the game, we don't see the game the same way the players do, because they're in the middle of the field and we're on the sideline. And so our perspective is different from what they see. So, but if you can make more of an informed decision, whether it's video, whether it's data analysis, whatever it is, and say, okay, we need to make a change. Here's why, right? And it's thought out. I think that more often than not, you're going to have better results from that because there's a reasoning behind it. I'm a very big, like, what's your why, right? Like, why are we doing this? Well, we're changing formation because we recognized we're getting killed in the midfield. We're giving up so many passes or so many shots, or this is what's happening. And you can point to a specific example. Then I think there's no wrong time to make a change.
So now what I'm gonna do, for people outside of New Jersey, this just might be like, whatever, but this was a really, really interesting topic you talked about during your presentation at the coaches convention that I wanted you to kind of hit again is, I'm gonna drop three names for you. Kearney, St. Peter's Prep, Harrison,
Yeah.
right? So you see those teams twice a year. Okay, so where is your, but yeah, right, sometimes three, even maybe, sometimes
Four.
Carney could
Sometimes
be
four.
four,
Hmm.
right? Um, where is your balance in adjusting your plan? Like maybe like Carney's having like they have a good year every year, but like say you're walking into a buzzsaw at Carney, are you like looking ahead and like maybe adjustments in that and the player, as far as the players too, because this was a really really interesting topic that you brought up, is managing your player load, still
Yeah.
trying to win that division, right? Playing Kearney, St. Peter's, Harrison, who are perennially top 10 programs in the state of New Jersey. How do you balance not only your tactics with playing so many high level, some of the top teams in New Jersey, as well as taking care of your players and being like, hey, I might not be able to consistently play my best 11 against these guys every single time.
Yeah, no, it is. It's a fun challenge because I'm a person that likes a challenge. Like, but and I'm sure again, I'm sure there's plenty of coaches that are listening to the pod. Like, they're like, oh yeah, well, we don't have Kearney and Harrison and Prep, but we have these three teams or these four teams. Like if you're playing, West Orange, Del Barton, and Seton Hall Prep a couple of times a year, you feel the pain too. Or I'm sure other coaches have the same thing. But for me, I think it's got to be a 50-50 split in terms of your opponent. I think 50% of your focus needs to be on your team and what you can do to make your team better. And then 50% needs to be, okay, but in preparation for playing, this team that we're playing, they're very much a counterattack team. How can we make adjustments to sort of deal with that? Right. Like, so I think that's got to be the balance in terms of what you work on. It is tough because, like there are weeks or, oh man, you look at the, like, you said it, like sometimes you look at, oh, who are we playing this week, and it's just a firing squad, right? It's just a buzz. How do I get through it? And I think that again, that's where going back to periodization and having that plan and saying, okay, because next week is going to be such a challenge physically, psychologically, emotionally, this week maybe we have a little bit of a lighter schedule. Can I play other kids, maybe not necessarily my starting 11 players? Can I play those game changers a bit more to keep my starting 11 fresher, and then also keeping the game changers match fit if I do need to call on them, right? Because as I've mentioned, like, because the high school season is so grueling, a kid that you think maybe wasn't a starter in the beginning of the season, you may have to call on week 7, week 8, because through injury, through whatever it is, like, you now have to call on him. But if for 8 weeks, if that kid has only played 4 or 5 minutes a game once a week or twice a week, now maybe at the beginning of the season, maybe they were fit and maybe they were very well conditioned and they were ready to go. But now 8 weeks of not really doing very much because on the games they're not playing. And then on the in-between days, it's a recovery day, so you're not challenging them physically that much. Now, 8 weeks in, they can't run more than 10 or 15 minutes because they haven't had to in 2 months, right? And so again, I lean back on that periodization element of like, when I'm looking at my macro, can I play those players whenever I can, the game changers, to get them their match fitness as much as possible? Can I have a plan for how I want to address training? Again, it's so much, the emphasis on planning, I think, is so vital because if you have a tough schedule, you have such limited time. If you're walking into a training session without a clear plan of, okay, here's what we're working on today, the reason because we're playing Kearney this day, we're playing Del Barton that day, we're playing Don Bosco this day, or we're playing Rancocas Valley, that whatever school you're playing, if you don't have it sort of efficiently planned out, I think you're missing a step, right? Because you don't have the luxury of, we'll get to it tomorrow. No, you won't, because tomorrow you have a different game or a different opponent. Like,
Tomorrow there's new fire. Yeah, we're gonna deal with something else now.
Yeah, like, you need to have that understanding, and I think that that's where sometimes, I joked before, like, where sometimes you can blink and half the season's gone. That's how quick I think that the high school season moves like you're in there and you're thinking, and it's tough. It's a juggle, right? You're trying to, okay, who's our next opponent? But then I also I don't want to look past who our next opponent is, but I do have to plan for the next couple of weeks. Especially, I'm more mindful of it the deeper we get into the season, because obviously, rightly or wrongly, so much of the emphasis on like postseason play, like my best player is kind of carrying a knock week 7, week 8. We have when you have to sometimes make tough decisions. All right. Like we're playing a rival school tomorrow. My best player is not on 100%. The state tournament starts next week. If we win the game tomorrow and his hamstring goes, great, we won the game. But now I don't have my best player for the state tournament because his hamstring went. And managing that load and understanding of like, okay, how can I sort of track how many minutes, what the physical training load is for each player. Again, that's where I lean on the periodization. Without a plan, okay, well, you're going to play this many minutes, or this is how we're training, or this is a high intensity day, this is a low intensity day. Because you forget, right? Like if I ask a coach that doesn't really have a plan, what did you do last Tuesday at training? They have absolutely no idea, because they didn't really have it scripted out. As opposed to, well, no, we had a light day Tuesday, we had a more intense day Thursday, because we played Monday, Wednesday, Saturday. So that's how we could do it. Whatever it is, right? So, and I think that you have to do it when you're looking at the high school schedule, because there's just so many games in such a short period of time.
Yeah, and I feel like I've struggled with that in the past. It's just like you're just overwhelmed with like I don't know what to do. There's so many fires, and there isn't that something to kind of grab onto. And hearing you talk about some of the KPIs or talking them, hey, we were good, we were bad. It reminds me of a story I remember. In my old school, there was a basketball player. She was phenomenal, and her coach was ripping her apart at halftime. I was like, you're better than this. What are you doing? And the assistant like grabs his arm. And was like, hey, just heads up, she's got triple double right now. Like she's doing really good. Like, and you're like, but if you go solely off of vibe, like there is an element to it that is vibes and your own eyes and eyeball tests and stuff like that. But also, she's got triple double. She's doing all right. And in listening to your presentation and seeing some of the stuff you had on there, some of the KPIs like 25% dribble rate here. This is kind of a two-part question here, but you've got all this data. How are you finding that data? Is it breaking down film? Is it you have someone on the sideline, tracking this stuff mid-game? And how much are you bringing your coaches in? Because one of the things I really loved about your presentation was the Sunday meetings you guys had about, hey, we're going to set it up. We're going to spend 20 minutes here. We're going to talk about everything we need to do, and just that planning it. I just really love that concept. So can you just talk about the development of your KPIs and how much you're instituting your assistants, your managers, your AI filming tabs, whatever that is? How do you come up with these ideas?
So for me, when I first started, it's probably one of the biggest differences I had between when I started coaching 24 years ago to now. Like when I first got into coaching, I thought that a head coach had to do every single thing and shouldn't ever delegate, and delegating was a sign of weakness, and I'm the head coach and I should know everything. And then it wasn't for a few years that I suddenly realized like just how stupid that was. Like the best coaches want to surround themselves with the best people. Like I firmly believe that. Like, and so it absolutely, for me, like you want to find good people that you can work with, whether it's managers, assistant coaches, volunteers, whoever, right? Like, and that's the beautiful thing about high school sports is there's always passionate people that want to get involved, right? So whether it's, and again, sometimes I always recommend to coaches, like, if you have to make cuts, because that's like the worst part of coaching, like cutting players, especially when they desperately want to play, but perhaps you don't have the room, or they're not at the level, or there's an issue, that whatever. But there's nothing to say that you can't have that player who maybe can't compete, but they can be a manager. Like, so the way we track data for me is as much as possible. Like film, yes, film is great because you can always rewatch things, right? Where it's hard sometimes live to catch elements of data, but it can be, something as simple as, okay, I'll have a manager or an assistant coach or a volunteer parent do me a favor. We've been working on our 1v1 battles for the last week. can you track, and I want my fullbacks getting forward and engaging players in a 1v1. Can you track how many times they try to engage somebody in a 1v1 and then how many times they're successful? And then it's just a matter of, okay, they tried it 10 times, they were successful 5 times, 50% of the time they were successful. Awesome. And so that becomes a very easy KPI of like, okay, can we improve on that? Or the other teams took 12 shots and they scored 8 goals. Wow, we really need to work on, for my goalkeeper, like positioning or what were the reasonings behind it. So getting the data is I wouldn't say it's the easiest part, but it is, as long as you have clear definitions of what you're looking for, right? Because
you plan for it.
Yeah, and again, that it just leans back on
like,
the
look for a bunch of stuff and tell me what you think, guys. Like, I love that.
Yeah. And that again goes back to the planning and the periodization part, because it's the beautiful part of our sport is that we all look at games differently. And again, it's such a like open sport, right? Whereas, and I don't know much about other sports, but for me, other sports very often are kind of boring to watch because they're so formulaic, like American football, like a guy has to run 7 steps and then turn to his left immediately. Like it just, for me, like that doesn't seem appealing. Again, like for people it does, great, but for me that doesn't. Like our sport, the ref blows the whistle and then that's it. Chaos. Our players have to be able to make adjustments and make decisions immediately, right? So having a clear understanding of what you're looking for and communicating it out to the manager, the assistant coach, whoever it is paramount, right? Like, can they track it? The video is always good, like I said, because you can always go back and wait, how many was it? Because sometimes you miss it, right? Like, I was writing something down, or I sneezed, or I was talking to a kid, or whatever, and you miss. So the video is great. And then, I'm sorry, what was the second part of your question? It was
just how much are you, you kind of already answered with how much you're using the coaches, but even like just talk a little bit about those meetings on Sunday that you talked about. I talk to my coaches every day and I'm texting them all the time, but I love that like structured, like we're going to sit, we're going to talk, we're going to plan these things out. And I was even like making bullet points as you were talking about it at the convention, like this is what the points are, because everyone's so busy, everyone's got so many things in life, and all my, my coaches have kids or they're working. And it's like, but having that Sunday meeting with like the bullet point list, here we got it, good, great. And I feel like everyone would go into the week feeling so much better.
One of the benefits, and I say that, and I recognize it's strange, but one of the benefits of the pandemic and COVID was everyone's, comfortability with being on an online virtual meeting from your phone, from your iPad, from your computer. Like, we're recording this podcast right now virtually, right? Like I'm not sitting in a recording studio. So having a group of coaches, just having a standing meeting in season. All right, Sunday nights, 9:30, it's going to be 20 minutes. That's it. Where we dedicate, okay, here's our upcoming week. We have a game Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. We're playing this team on Tuesday, this team on Thursday, this team on Saturday. So we're going to train Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Here are the things we're going to work on Monday. Here are the things we're going to work on Wednesday. Here are the things we're going to work on Friday. Again, keeping it short, sweet, just having a blueprint for what we're doing, and allowing whoever you're working with to, have sort of a check-in with the week upcoming. Because again, having been involved in high school athletics for over 20 years, during the week, I'm getting out of school and I'm dealing with a parent and my AD's calling me, or I got to speak to the principal, or I'm talking to this player. If everyone has a clear plan of the expectations and what we're working on, we can all work together to get our goals, right? Like, whereas if that hasn't been shared out, wait, what are we working on? Wait, what are we doing? What's happening? And sometimes emergencies happen. A kid shows up to the field and they're having a meltdown because they're having a crisis, and I have to go talk to that player. If my assistant or whoever else I'm working with, if they have an understanding of what we're working on, it's seamless. They know what we're doing. And so again, it goes back to that point I raised several times, where it's like we have such limited time in a high school season. 20 minutes on a Sunday night, like, again, the season is let's call it 10 weeks. 20 minutes on a Sunday night, it's 200 minutes. That's it. Once a week, 20 minutes. And again, that doesn't mean you don't also text and check in with each other throughout the day. But having that standing meeting and just having an understanding between the coaching staff and just saying, okay, this is non-negotiable, guys. Like we want to get better. Because again, like I have high expectations and I have high levels of accountability I want for my players. I also have it for, anyone I work with, but I also have them for myself. And so I'm prepared for that Sunday night meeting. Here, like an agenda. We're going to go over this, and this. This is what we need to look out for. Oh, hey, look, this player is having an issue in school. We got to make sure we stay on top of it. Or this player wasn't feeling well last week. Let's check in with them. Because again, then everyone is aware of what you're working on and everyone is on the same page. Instead of Wednesday, oh, hey, I have an emergency and just come up with, go do a possession thing and I'm going to be back. And again, and that happens all the time because life gets in the way all the time. And I think that just having that 20-minute check-in, just seeing big picture stuff, you know what, last week, these 3 players didn't really play very much. Can we have an opportunity to get them to play more minutes this week? You know what we haven't worked on? Is our wall jumping or is our wall standing their ground on free kicks? Well, on the right side of the field, we want them to jump. On the left side of the field, we want them to stand tall. Like whatever it is, again, having everybody on the same page. Because I've seen coaches too, and sometimes I've watched it and I've just shaken my head. I have seen 3 coaches on the same staff all yelling out 3 conflicting pieces of information to the players on the field.
Usually on the other side of the field.
and no, but imagine again. I often find it amusing when coaches are screaming their heads off on the sideline. Because very often, I know back when I was playing or when I was, whether it was soccer, or wrestling, or any sport, once you get into the chaos of the game, sometimes, you hear the noise, but you don't necessarily understand exactly what it is they're saying. So it's kind of like, I don't want to say it's white noise, but you don't know exactly the level of specificity. But if you have multiple adults shouting out conflicting pieces, because if they're not on the same page, it's really unfair to expect the players to understand what you're trying to get across. If you as a staff, if you can't be on the same page, but you're expecting a bunch of kids, just for me, that's very, very unfair and frankly unprofessional. Like I think that the staff should have a clear idea of what we're working on, what we're trying to accomplish, so that everyone is kind of pulling in the same direction.
Yeah, we even use hand signals on the field to be like, I understand you, or like repeat it. 'Cause again, kids will be like, yeah, and you're like, did you get it? They're like, no. Like, and same with the coaches. So we have like,
we're in a 4-4-2, like, right, Coach?
Oh, don't even bring that one up. Oh, that was I remember that one.
And again, it's funny, but at the same time, the players, and again, our sport is unique in that we don't have the luxury of timeouts or the 2-minute warning. Or, right? Like, we don't have all the stoppages that other sports have. And so our players have to be able to make split-second decisions for the entire game, right? Like, our sport, more than any other sport, right? Like, we have to make split-second decisions and with 20 other players on the field and have to contend with the referees and the weather and the elements. And are we playing on turf? Are we playing on grass? Or the sun was in my eye? Or the wind blew? Or I don't feel well today. Whatever it is. And then adults on the side of the field are jumping up and down and screaming and breaking clipboards and throwing things. And it's like, yeah, but you don't have a clear understanding of what you want. How can you expect the players to understand what you want? And so Sunday night meetings, those check-ins, the pregame meeting, like as well, like before, the game even starts, having that check-in with your staff and saying, okay, what are the 3 things we're going to work on today as a staff? Not even before you get to the players, like what are the 3 things we're going to try to accomplish today to, again, really reinforce and hammer that point home so that when the pregame talk or during the game, like everyone understands what it is we're trying to work on. Because if you're waiting until the game starts to try to pick out what you're looking for, I see the game differently than you. Our game is very subjective. I see, we could both watch. When I'm teaching courses, it happens all the time. It happened last night. We're watching a clip for the D license I'm teaching, and it was like a 4-minute clip, and the students were supposed to just pick out different attacking moments they saw. And I had 15 coaches on the course, and I had 15 different opinions about what they saw of the same clip. And that's just the nature of our sport. So the more clarity you can have, and it just relates to planning, the better off you're going to be and the more prepared.
Absolutely love it. I think that's all, that's some great stuff. And especially I think too, for coaches, like you said, it's, I no shame about it. I coach freshman soccer. You see some stuff that at the freshman level sometimes. So, I think that, just the communication all throughout the program, because even with me, like, seeing, all right, this freshman coach has just rolled the balls out and they're just doing a shooting line for 5 minutes before a game shows clear lack of communication from the top. So, I think really, if there's something to take away from that, it's just the attention to, not even just the attention to detail, just a plan and everything like that. So coach, we've reached the hour mark here. So, what we want to do is, we've had this great talk about periodization, having a plan. We wrap up all of our episodes with a drill share. So kind of like, hey, again, the whole point of this episode is, hey, don't walk out there and just throw the cones down and hope something happens. But say you're in a situation like, hey, you need a drill where you have to throw the cones down, and but it still aligns with your periodization plan. What's one of your favorite go-to drills when you're planning your season out?
So I like to set up my activities so they all link to each other. So again, it goes back to that planning stage. So my activity 1 links to my activity 2, activity 3. So I'll give you one, but it's kind of 3 different activities in the same. So if I have 18 players show up, I will put 6 of them in red, 6 of them in yellow, and 6 of them in blue. And we'll start off inside the 18, and they'll start off with red has to pass to yellow, yellow has to pass to blue, blue has to pass back to red. So it's just a progression, but they'll be in the 18, so 18 players inside the box, and they have to do that. So we'll start off with 1 ball, and then I'll add a second and a third and a fourth and a fifth and a sixth and a 7th ball. So all of a sudden, there's 7 or 8 balls going, and I'll add like a fitness component. So if a ball goes outside of the box, everyone stops, everyone does 5 push-ups and back up on their feet. If 2 different players pass a ball to Matt, everybody stops, everyone drops down, does 5 push-ups, and then they're back on their feet. So there's a fitness component, but I feel like it's more game-like, it's more realistic. Players have to communicate, have to constantly be moving. They have to go and look for a ball. Like, again, if I'm a red, I know the only person that can play me a ball is someone wearing a blue. So if I don't have a ball, my job is to go find a blue player and be able to receive a ball. Because, again, I might even add a touch restriction. Okay, you can only have 2 or 3 touches before you have to get rid of it, or 5 push-ups, whatever. And it's never like punitive. It's never like 1,000 push-ups, but it's just something to get them moving, get them thinking. We'll then move outside of the box, and we'll do like 3-team possession. So it's almost like a monkey in the middle style thing. So again, 6 players in red, 6 players in yellow, 6 players in blue. Blue and red start with the ball. Yellow's trying to win it back in like maybe a 40 by 40 grid. And then again, so my transition from my first activity to my second activity is seamless. There's no like, I don't need to set anything up. I don't need to do anything. The cone's already down. And then if yellow wins the ball, whoever lost possession of the ball is now suddenly in the middle. So if it was red and blue, blue knocks it out of bounds. Now blue's in the middle. It's red and yellow, or if yellow wins the ball back, whatever it is. And then I'll then just transition right into like a counterattacking game. So I'll set up like, if there's 6 players on each color, I'll put like 3 reds on one side, 3 yellows on another, 3 blues on another, and then it'll just be like as soon as a goal is scored, the team that was off instantly starts countering the other way. So if red scores a goal, like 3v3, if they score a goal, the moment they score, now they have to, they're defending versus blue coming the other way. So it's just almost like a constant flow of like attacking and defending back and forth. So minimal setup. We go from activity 1 to activity 2 to activity 3, a lot of different touches on the ball, constant chaos and movement, and just trying to get the players as prepared as possible. So that's the best I got for you, Coach.
No, I love that, because it reminds me of Fed. If you remember, we did like from a rondo perspective, where we had the rondo, where we'd have 1 ball, 1 touch, they'd pass, and we'd 2 ball, 3 ball, 4 ball, and that once the ball left the rondo circle with no one unopposed in the middle, it left, and it talked about a lot of getting the players the chaos and the control, and we worked on for communication for that. But I like that more, where it's a little more dynamic, a little bit more movement based, and a little more game like, and just kind of scaling it up. And I always love the idea of like, you lay out the cones, and all you're doing is picking up cones instead of laying out cones. Because I think it's just a killer in the middle of your session, where you're like, all right, guys, take a water break. Me and Coach over here are going to try to do parallel sessions and do our cones the same. And you're like, all right, what's going on here? But I love that.
And a common thing, no, I was going to say a common thing I've talked about is like, you have such limited time. Why are you going to waste a quarter of your practice picking up cones or setting up cones or putting down equipment? Set it up ahead of time. So then that way, when you start, like I'm adamant, a high school training session should never be longer than 90 minutes. Like if that, like I'm talking start to finish. The players are off the field after, 89th minute, they're done. Because again, they've had an 8-hour school day. Or, and now it's a 90 minutes and, we have a game tomorrow. Like I hear about coaches having like 3-hour practices and I'm like, what are you doing? Like, that's how you pick up injuries. And again, you're just kind of throwing mud against the wall and you're hoping something sticks. Like that's not a plan. You're just trying to do too much. So yeah.
We started the season with 3-hour practice, but the 3 hours is 90-minute session. We're onboarding with uniforms or we're
right, yeah.
Sure. Then by the end of the season, we'll do an hour. We're at an hour by the end of the season where it's like, what are we doing here? Like, I'm going to run you again. Like we played, 4 games last week.
Exactly.
And the other one we do is we have the reversible pennies. I swear by that. I think every program should have reversible pennies just because it's like, they hated it because they're like, these are just basketball pennies. I'm like, but
about to say the basketball jerseys.
But I love it because it's just like you're in and out. Like you're black and you're not like, all right, we're going to go take my white penny off, run off to the side of the field, talk to an injured player, switch on. Like it's just like switch now, and we can just quickly transition. Again, cutting down as much time as possible is so important for these sessions.
Unfortunately, we don't have the basketball penny money up here in Union City. So what I'll very often do with my players, I'll have everybody put on like red pennies, and then so everyone will maybe put on a red penny, and then I'll put 6 of the players, put a yellow penny over the red penny, so they'll double up. And so I know that everybody's in a red. So that way, okay, I need to switch players or I need to suddenly add a new team or, okay, we're just going to scrimmage 6v6 at the end. You 6 take off your top penny. I know everyone's got the red penny underneath. And then boom, it just makes it easier, right? So
there's a little more prep. It speeds it up so much.
Exactly.
I was just gonna say thank you so much. I mean, this has been awesome.
This has been incredible.
Again, this presentation at the convention just stood out. It's just a different way of thinking about it. I've always been told it's like, well, you watch the game and then you adjust your session based on it, but like you said, I feel like the preparation, the planning you put into it creates that freedom. It creates the ability to adjust on the fly because you do have that solid base. And I just found that so interesting, and it really helps out. And thank you so much for responding. I mean, we had a run right after, and we DM'd you, and you were right there ready to talk to us and sending us the presentation. So one thing I want to talk about is like, what are some ways that people can get in contact with you? I mean, you have such a wealth of knowledge, and you love talking about the game. What would be the best way to get in contact with you if anyone had any questions?
I have social media. I have an Instagram account, which is just Shap, SHAP_UC13. That's, that, or my email address, which is just wshapiro13@hotmail.com. And I routinely, again, just from all the different organizations I'm a part of, being on the national committee, like I have coaches constantly emailing me. I was on a Zoom call with a coach a couple hours ago from upstate New York because he had some questions about my presentation. I will talk about soccer with anyone like at any time. It doesn't matter. Like people want to reach out. If people couldn't make the convention, I've routinely offered like, oh, hey, my coaches and I couldn't make the convention. We'd love the presentation, or could you come in or do it over Zoom? I'm happy to do it. Right. Like I like working with other coaches, and I'm an educator. Like that's why I'm put on the planet. Like I like helping people get better at stuff. And so I really enjoy it. And so thank you guys for having me on. I appreciate, this forum and an opportunity. And, it's always a good time to talk with, again, because you guys or anyone who's listening to the podcast or any coach, like, coaching is hard, right? Like there's so much that goes into it and there's so much sacrifice. And so for people to be passionate and care about it and wanting to get better and wanting to learn, like I have so much respect for coaches, like, because it's such an underappreciated role, right? And in a school setting, 9 times out of 10, oh, this kid's screwing up, go get the coach, or I'm going to tell your coach. And so when there's a problem with a kid, suddenly we're
getting text messages as we're talking about.
Yeah, when there's a problem,
tomorrow.
When there's a problem with a kid, suddenly we're the first line. But then we're sort of seen as an afterthought in terms of the educational community. And I don't think that's fair, because I think what we do is incredibly valuable to the school community and also the community at large. So no, happy to talk soccer or education or anything with anybody at any time. So appreciate you guys.
We're all in it together. That's what I always say, is this profession's all about connections and, helping each other out, because we're all in it together at the end of the day.
Until we see you at the HSPD tournament this summer.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we'll see. I guess we'll see.
Oh, that wasn't that pretty this year, but awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you for coming on. Thank you everybody that's listening. I got 30 more questions I could ask, but we'll have to save it for part 2. So thank you, Coach Shap. Thanks, Fed, and we'll see you guys next time.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate you.